Yeah.
Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 45, I believe. It's been a minute. I think both Aaron and I have needed a little bit of downtime to come off of our league experience and our TGFBI experience. What's going on, Aaron?
Not too much. How have you been?
I've been good, man. It's been quite the emotional roller coaster, fantasy baseball wise and real life baseball wise for me. But I think I'm starting to get my feet back on the ground and able to talk baseball a little bit more. How about you?
Yeah, it's had a deeper postseason run in our home league than I've ever had. Up to the last day and the last few at bats for my players, so it was a different experience for sure. Um, yeah, but so very proud of that and really enjoying the postseason games so far.
I don't know.
So I think they've been super compelling, and honestly, I can't say I've really made any decisions, but I'm excited about trying to remake our keeper league roster. I'm just excited to about where I am and where maybe we want to go. So definitely no firm ideas yet, but
Awesome.
like it's very possible.
Right
So
on. So this episode, we're gonna just kind of catch up and talk a little fantasy baseball, talk about the playoffs a little bit, do some open forum, and if we have time, we'll open some cards. I admittedly don't have a whole lot of coffee stories for you. The one kind of coffee, even though it's been a couple of weeks, the one coffee story I guess I can tell is uh, I got a bag of Stumptown instead of Walla Walla Roastery, and there was a part of me that felt disloyal to local Walla Walla by buying Stumptown, and it just reminded me of the coffee experiences that I used to have when Stumptown kind of first became a big deal and opened their coffee shop on 12th in Seattle near Seattle U. I think that was their foray into the Seattle market. That and then the one on I think on Pine. For those who don't know, Stumptown is a Portland company, so it was a big deal for them to expand into Seattle. But at the time, they roasted a little bit lighter and were kind of at the forefront of a lot of the third wave stuff. And I it just reminded me of being like that coffee hipster that rode my fixed gear bike from South Seattle to Seattle U to be able to drink Stumptown coffee. Their coffee has since been, or their company has since been sold, and they roast a little bit darker than they used to. So the experience isn't quite the same, but it was still a good cup of coffee.
is there a history behind their name? I obviously I know them. That what it,
You
I've
know,
never
I don't know the history behind the name. All I know is it's like, you know, uh a lot of the old school Portland coffee drinkers are very, very loyal to Stumptown, and that it was kind of the cool kids experience for, I would say, 18 months to 2 years to walk into the Stumptown shop in Seattle on 12th and have a shot of Hairbender, and it was a they were doing something really cool at the time. And
Hmm,
I think that when they started to mass produce, they started to roast a little bit darker and lost a little bit of the coolness for me at least. But
interesting.
a fun experience. How about you?
Yeah, so I was just out of town for a couple days and we stayed at a it's kind of a
Glamping.
camper made out of a shipping container. It's kind of
Oh, cool.
interesting, but anyway, it was
Mhm.
kind of in a campground. But anyway, as anyone who knows me or listens to this pod, one of the first things I have to do when I travel is figure out what the coffee situation is. So prior to going,
Aeropress. Did you
at
buy
a list
Aeropress?
of I looked at the list of amenities. They had a coffee maker on the list. So, but a very simple kitchen. So it didn't have a lot of, they want to bring a lot of equipment. So I'm like, all right, they have a coffee pot. So I brought some uh, coffee ready to go for flat bottom coffee maker,
Uh-huh.
flat bottom shape, and one lighter roast and one medium roast. And but then I got there and they had no filters. So the first thing I did was I looked towards the
Oh,
coffee and there was no filters.
brutal.
They had these little, they kind of look like tea bags, but they were circular, and that was what was in the kitchen drawer. And I
Mhm.
guess you just lay that in the bottom of the basket, but I was like, just it's not going to work for me. So I called the guy who kind of welcomed us and checked us in, and I was like, hey, do you have any coffee filters, and he brought him as he brought me some from home. Uh, some little circular flat bottom filters so I could brew coffee, and it was awesome. It was kind of laughable on my part that it's such a priority, but the fact is it is a priority, and then also just the act of kindness on his part to bring me some filters so we could brew coffee while we were there. It
Right.
was appreciated.
I would say the ability to secure a cup of coffee in the morning is as important as the ability to secure food over the course of the rest of the day. So
It's basic,
I don't,
pretty
yeah,
much.
I
Pretty
don't blame
much.
you one bit. If it was me, I would get to a place where it would probably be the thinnest t-shirt that I brought, right? That was clean, that I would run the coffee through if you really, really had to. That or you find some sort of bag that was porous enough to let the coffee through. That's funny though. All right, man. So season's over, obviously. You made the championship round in our home league. Congratulations, Chico, Ken, for winning our league. I made the semis. We don't have to rehash too much, just to let the listeners know that that league is done, and I think most of us have already started diving into a full 2022 uh, set of Major League Baseball statistics, which has been a lot of fun so far. We also won our TGFBI league, which is, I think, it's a hell of an accomplishment given the fact that this is our first time participating. I think we finished 16th overall. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, 15,
Mhm.
16, 17, right there in the middle
Uh,
teams. Yeah.
So I think it was 16 out of 465, which is, like I said, a heck of an accomplishment. It was, it's an expert league, so it's a bunch of people who are writers and pay attention to fantasy. And you and I haven't talked a whole lot about TGFBI recently. What's your initial reaction, and then what are some of your takeaways from our first year at TGFBI?
Well, I think, we won our solo league by 19 points, which is pretty
Mhm.
dominant. And so I think there's a lot to be proud of there in just terms of what we constructed. I think, I haven't not competed in a lot of overall contests. My initial thought on that was just you have to compete really well all the categories to do really well in the overall. So our pitching was definitely ahead of our hitting. Um, and on the hitting side, it was really, batting average is where we really weren't super competitive. Um, and so I've had some thoughts of what we can do differently in terms of managing our roster. Maybe we can talk about that down the road. I don't know if that's applicable here, but yeah, I think, from a pitching standpoint, the other thing that sticks out to me is where we came out of the draft, where we didn't invest in the top 10 rounds, as I recall, I may be in 9-10 range, but, we were pushing off catcher and we were pushing off closers. Um, and we made the decision to invest elsewhere. And I think that definitely paid dividends with our rotation. Our first four, I think we had. Trying to remember when we took Gilbert. I think we had Gilbert by the ninth, and he was our fourth.
Mhm.
And
It's
and then yeah,
Cease Verlander,
Nola,
Nola, and
and I
Gilbert.
think Gilbert was the fourth.
Mhm.
So we had all four of those starters before we had a catcher or a reliever. And I looked at, where we ultimately ended up with Cal Raleigh as our C1, who I don't know if he or Will Smith were led the position in home runs, but I know he was right there with Will Smith up until the last weekend.
Mhm.
So that was, area of focus for us. We kept churning, kept looking, and I think that is a win for us. And then also finishing second in saves. We had 75 saves. And coming out of the draft, that was again not an area where we invested early round picks in.
Right.
So I think what that says to me is when we know we came out knowing we have to work on these things, these are areas where we didn't invest heavily in the draft. So we're going to have to be really intentional and planful about picking up, improving the position to be competitive. And we did that. So to me, that's really informative of our management and what it produced.
Right. So Raleigh did lead the league or lead catchers in home runs last year.
Oh, okay, I knew he was right there. Yeah.
He had 27. Will Smith had 24.
Mm.
Let's see here. Wilson Contreras at 22. Real Muto at 22. Contreras at 20. And I think that's the extent of Oh, sorry, Salvador Perez at 23. But that's the extent of the catchers that were in the 20s. It's interesting because you know, I agree with all the things you said, and I think that our having this kind of baseline of starting pitching really drove our team. We never really worried about starting pitching, so we were able to use our fab money on um, reliever kind of flyers, and so we picked up Helsley. I think we picked it. Did we pick or pick up Seawald as well?
He was one of our picks.
Okay, so
He
we
was
were
our third or fourth reliever.
right. So we were really able to speculate quite a bit at both catcher and reliever. And I think when you can throw that many opportunities at the wall, something will stick. Um, yeah, I don't know. Overall, I'm really proud of it. I think that we got lucky with a little bit of it, but
Also,
Nola bouncing back isn't really. There were people who doubted it, but if you looked at his peripherals, you realize Aaron Nola is a really good pitcher, and he is going to bounce back. Verlander, I think we did get a little bit lucky with Verlander too, but we also, his track record said he was going to be. He's like Nolan. He really is like the modern day Nolan Ryan in a lot of ways. Not quite. He's not 44 years old yet, but he still has that kind of longevity that when he decides to retire, it's going to be on his terms, and he's probably going to continue to be great for a long time. Um, Gilbert, we did a lot of research in terms of understanding Gilbert's extension on his, the release of his pitches and the effectiveness of his fastball and his work ethic and willingness to try to improve. And that was a bit speculative, but we knew that Logan Gilbert at minimum was going to be as good as he was the previous year. But I think the big one for us was Dylan Cease, because there was a moment when we were kind of discussing offline and realized that he had what was the whiff rate on all three pitches? Was it 40% on three pitches?
I think it was 3/40.
Three pitches over 40%. And people were, I wouldn't say sleeping on him, but he was a pitcher that was rated a little less highly because of his wildness.
Right.
There
There was
was
a lot of focus on what he wasn't good at.
right, and we really prioritized Cease. I think we picked him in was it the fourth or the fifth round?
It was a little bit later than that, I think, but it was in that range.
Right. So to build a staff like that and to not have to really worry about strikeouts or a lot of the counting stats, because we had built four really solid starters, I think was kind of the baseline for what we achieved. And then, the hitting portion of it, we got lucky with Julio. Um, I think we knew there was talent there. We didn't know that there was a 25-25 season there. And then the Machado pick was a well thought out one. And he kind of proved exactly what we thought when we picked him, which was he may not be an absolute superstar, but he is predictable. He plays through injury, and we're going to get a baseline at third base that's going to put us or keep us competitive. Lindor was another one. It was about digging into his peripherals and thinking that Lindor may not be the Cleveland Lindor, but he's still going to be a really high end shortstop. And I think he was the one we took in the fourth, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, I'm just proud of our ability to compete. And I think that nothing was a fluke on our team. We didn't fly by the seat of our pants. We did a lot of research. We followed our numbers, and there were some hunches that we followed that really did pay off. And for me, that's really, really cool. So yeah,
I think my critique of us was that we were very trustworthy of guys like Votto, Vaughn, Catal Marte, players that we liked and thought of, and we were very, very patient with them. And I'm not saying that we should have been super reactionary to their April or May and bench them, but maybe there were opportunities to look for upgrades earlier than we did.
right.
But I look back at like what Vaughn produced, what Marte produced, and like, wow, we played them every single week, home or away. We treated them as stalwarts, and their performance didn't dictate that. So that's something I'll go back and look at too, of how do we assess those types of players. But yeah, because we had a few underperformers and we stayed exceedingly patient.
Right. I would say in hindsight, I still believe in sticking with players with track record,
I think we will too. Yeah.
but maybe utilizing a couple of the waiver claims and a little bit more fab money on a second first baseman or a second baseman, like taking flyers on players at that position, even though we intend on sticking with a Joey Votto. Maybe we pick up some like I always want to say Hesop Choi, G-Man Choi, or someone like that who's going to, kind of give us a replacement level sort of performance. I do think that would have helped us, and I think we would have finished
Yeah.
in the top 10 if we would have been able to um, been willing to replace those players a little bit quicker than we were.
Yeah. I definitely feel like that's our area of opportunity. But the pitching, like you said, the analysis and the construction of that. And I think just also the steadiness being in our first go around,
Right,
to not be swept up in the closer frenzy, to not be to really stay to our process and draft guys who we saw as talented, and
right,
maybe there was some uncertainty about role, guys like Duvall and Bednar, and like we knew those guys had stuff. We knew, that it wasn't like get the ball every time early in the
right,
season, but um, we believed in their talent, and ultimately that led to opportunities for those type of guys. So
right.
really proud of that.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too.
It's funny thinking about our home league too, because I feel like I struggled with holds most of the season, but
Uh-huh.
it's like the third year in a row where by the end of the year I'm like, man, I just wish I could keep this group for the next year. But it seems to take me like 4 or 5 months to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I finally have the group the way that I want it to be. And
Right.
in the meantime, I just churn like all these picks,
Well, I think,
changing them out, trying to find the right combination. But by the end, I'm like, this is it. This
right.
is it.
Well, the bullpen conversation is going to be really interesting this offseason. Because if you look at bullpens that were like how a bullpen was constructed in the beginning of the year versus what that bullpen looks like at the end of the year, you're lucky to have one bullpen member the same as when you drafted, right? Like literally, most teams have like somewhere between 0 and 1. And so if you're active. And so I think the conversation is going to be really interesting as to, are you willing to spend high picks or a lot of fab money on relief pitchers that you think are going to be good, or is it better to spend all of your picks on offense and starting pitching, knowing that bullpens churn in the way that they do, right? I think, like, think about the conversation about the St. Louis bullpen,
Hmm.
and we had no idea what was going to happen. And people spent high picks on uh, Giovanni, or not what is Giovanni
Gallegos.
Gallegos? Why am I forgetting?
Hmm. Yeah.
But really, Helsley was the guy to have in that bullpen. And I just think that think about the Dodgers bullpen. Everyone was fighting to have the Dodgers closer, knowing they're going to win like 100,000 games, and they never really ended up with a real closer. Like they had a
Hmm.
closer who got saves, but he was really shitty,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the conversation about how to value bullpen is going to be incredibly interesting, and I hope that people are willing to move off of pushing the top two or three closers all the way up towards like the bottom of the first round and in the second round, because I just don't think that's a really great strategy. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean, whatever the answer, will not be in that camp of just, oh, well, it's fungible. You can't rely on it. So just punt on it.
Right,
I think if you look at the teams that do well in head to head, they do have rosters that put up those categories. And speaking for myself, not this year, the prior year, that was really a weakness of mine. I really didn't have saves. So I was really going into every playoff matchup giving away saves.
right,
And it's like you're starting one down already. And
right.
it's really hard to advance that way.
Well, I don't know if, for me at least, I don't know if it's about giving away the category as much as that category, saves and holds are like probably the most dynamic category, uh, or dynamic categories there are. And so to expend a ton of resources up front in the beginning of the season on those two categories, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you start to look at, we have enough statistics or numbers at our fingertips now, that the first couple of weeks, if we find the guys with great stuff and we find the guys who are, kind of popping up out of nowhere, and the former starter that's throwing 100 miles an hour now, you can really fill those categories in without having to spend big draft capital to acquire them. And so I don't know. Again, this is a conversation I think for the off season, but it's going to be very, very, very interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah. I enjoyed competing with your pitching staff all year. I know I'm probably one of the few ones that look at the stats in our head-to-head league as if it was a roto league, but your pitching staff, I think that just speaks to why when we collaborated, we did so well. Your pitching staff was really, really excellent in our head-to-head league, and was chasing you all year, and I was super pleased that I passed you in the end.
I appreciate that.
Barely. But yeah, I enjoyed competing against you in that respect.
I appreciate that. I think there's again, part of what I love about fantasy baseball is the philosophies and approaches are so dynamic. And I came into the season wanting to accumulate a lot of innings and a lot of quality starting pitching. And I felt like that was the right move, and it proved to be the right move. If it wasn't for injuries, I feel like it would have, I would have really shown that my pitching staff was, I was almost 9 deep by the end. Um, but especially in head to head, I just think that being able to accumulate a ton of strikeouts and a ton of innings, if you have a good enough staff, it can withstand a reliever who just gets saves, right? Or withstand a reliever who just gets holds but has bad ratios, because you have so many innings already accumulated. It's hard to beat a team that's starting 8 starters who are all decent. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Mariners and the MLB playoffs so far, and kind of our excitement around the upcoming series. We'll be right back. So first question is, how do you feel about the new baseball playoff format?
I'm a fan so far, but I think it's easy to say that because the quality of the games have been so good.
Yeah.
I like that there's no days off in between. I feel like they have to use their bullpen. They can't just throw their starters because there's not a bunch of days off. I like that it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the first weekend, and there's no travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, it gets they lose game 1 and game 2 is a must win. So it just ratchets up the intensity from that point on. So
Right.
I really liking it so far.
Yeah, man. What's crazy is, like, people made a big deal out of the host team hosting all 3 games instead of it being 2-1.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that the Mariners were like, just screw this. We're gonna go into Toronto and win 2 games and be done.
Yeah.
I think home field in baseball means less than it does in other sports. I don't really
Yeah.
know why, but yeah, I don't know. The Cleveland game was epic. The 15 innings. Obviously the Mariners comeback from 8-1 deficit was just an iconic win. I was, I don't know that I would put it up there with the 95 run quite yet, because the 95 run saved baseball in Seattle, but it's a definitely in second, and a pretty close second. Yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. The whole New York narrative about the Mets, and expecting the Mets to fail and heartbreak, and Philly going into St. Louis and just kind of giving it to the Cardinals and the Cardinals way. Like, I love that. That was super, super cool. And I also think it speaks to kind of the old adages of baseball where, pitching and defense and timely hitting matter. right?
Hmm.
If you look at the pitching matchups in the Philly series, you had Wheeler and Nola going against Quintana and Michaelis.
Hmm.
And I think St. Louis is probably a better club, top to bottom. But the reality is that pitching matchup, they just don't compare, right? The
Hmm.
Mariners, another example. I think that if you can go like I won't count Ray for the next series, but if you can go Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, and then you have Ray and you have the bullpen that the Mariners do, like you really don't. All you need is a little clutch hitting to win. But yeah, it's going to be awesome. Mariners Astros is going to be completely insane, and I guarantee you, I promise you, that the Mariners were not the team that the Astros wanted to see. That the Astros would have much rather played Tampa. Um, the one thing I will say about the format is just that I do miss this is the best wild card format I think that I've seen, but I do miss the pennant winners being the only ones to make the playoffs. I always thought that was super cool that you could win 105 games, but if the team in front of you won 106, you didn't make the playoffs.
Hmm.
Is there anything stylistically that's interesting to you about playoff baseball this year?
I've just appreciated that when we had extra innings, it was real extra innings. And you saw the difficulty that brings,
Mm-hmm.
how it changes the dynamic. And every time, there were several times I think Tampa got the leadoff hitter on via hit, and just that constant. Then okay, are they going to try to move him over? Um, I've seen several sacrifices. Brandon Marsh had a nice sacrifice last night, to move a runner over. So that kind of situational play, genuine extra innings, like I said, the managers not being able to just use their starters as relievers, really having to go to their true bullpen. I
Right.
think to me that was what was so impressive about the game yesterday in Cleveland is you just saw quality arm after quality arm after quality arm coming out
Right.
of each of those pens for 5, 6 extra innings. It's just really impressive. And um, yeah, I know we're not fans of a lot of the Tampa bullpen for non-baseball reasons, with good reason here, but their ability to get swing and miss against Cleveland impressed me, just because Cleveland doesn't swing and miss a lot.
Right.
I mean, I think Garrett Clevenger's struck out every single person he faced.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't see that. It's also interesting to me which guys the managers are okay going opposite handed, and which guys they always go to the dominant hand matchup.
Right.
It seemed like Cash did not want uh, uh, I once said Nola because he's a brother. Naylor, pardon me, he did not want Naylor to see a righty.
Right.
Almost every time Naylor came up, that would be his time to make a pitching change, which
Right.
was kind of interesting to me. Like, who do they really
Who do they
fear?
fear? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so yeah, it's great.
I'm looking up I'm gonna look up Naylor's splits right now.
Him and his brother, man, they look so much alike.
I know.
It's eerie.
I like Josh Naylor. I've always, especially in like sim formats, players like Naylor, I absolutely love. So yeah, so all right. So just the counting stats alone against righties is 283 with 19 home runs, and against lefties is 173 with 1 home run. So it's a third, and he said he had a third fewer or a third of the at bats versus lefties than against righties, 110 versus 339. I scroll down. He hit 283, 334, 522 with the 856 slug against righties. Interestingly, he only had a 6.5% walk rate and a 12.4% K rate. So a lot of contact against righties. Against lefties, 11% walk rate, 26.8% K rate, but a 173, 276, 236 triple slash and a 512 OPS. So very much a platoon left-handed bat. But it's what's cool, I think nowadays is there are enough statistics that are available to us, not just those, but some of the other stuff that we can look really quickly and see why is it that that they didn't want to let Josh Naylor face a right-hander. And in 10 seconds with the query, we can figure out, oh,
Yeah,
that makes complete sense, right?
right. I was just checking our dynasty league, our keeper league, and the same team rosters, both Naylor brothers. That's really funny.
Yeah, crazy. It's crazy. Um, what else about the playoffs is intrigued you, or what are you excited about moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're getting all the high seeds. I'm really interested to see what the Dodgers do with their rotation.
Yeah,
Um, and if they do piggybacks and things like that. Um, for the Braves, I think the way that the Dodgers played the last week or so, it literally looked like they were sleepwalking. And it's hard not to almost think the Braves have the momentum at this point.
yeah,
In the American League, I like Cleveland's chance against New York. Um, and unfortunately, I think the Astros is the favorite, but I don't think that means that they're unbeatable.
right.
It's just begrudgingly for me to admit.
Yeah, I think the I wonder in the NL, I do wonder if anyone is going to beat or anyone can beat the Dodgers. Obviously, in any series, somebody can beat you, and I think that the uh, the Braves have the pitching to well, the Braves and the Mets both have the pitching to compete. I would worry a little bit about the Padres. The cool thing about the Padres is they could get decent pitching, but have either Soto or Machado like really carry them. Um, I think Soto is. There's no reason for me to think that he's going to break out, but he's got like he really hasn't performed yet, right? But he's still a
Right.
superstar with superstar skills.
Sure.
Um, I'll be rooting for the Phillies just because I think they're kind of a fun team to root for. I'm also reading a book. I think it was written in '04. That's basically about the Braves and how they scout. And it's kind of annoying because it's there's a lot of makeup talk and there's a lot of scout talk and a lot of kind of talking down upon people who look at numbers and um, there's also the tomahawk chop portion of that organization that I don't agree with. I love a lot of their players, but I'm definitely rooting for the Phillies in that matchup. But obviously, my attention will be on Mariners Astros. The first thing I did when the Mariners won was look up how much tickets were in Seattle for the series, and they were at the time I think they were 260 or so. I don't know if they are now, but I also looked at what they were in Houston. They're like $30 because they're so used to going to playoff games. Um, but the tickets to Houston were too expensive. It was cost prohibitive. So I'll probably just try to catch as much as I can during work and at home. But super excited for obviously for the Mariners to be in this position because it's been 21 years since we've been able to really celebrate any sort of playoff success.
Have you ever seen playoff baseball live? I have not.
Mm-mm. I've seen a lot of playoff basketball live. I've seen college football bowl games, but I've never seen playoff baseball. I think it's I would love to go. Obviously, I think if I was in Seattle, I would go. But the what it takes to get to Seattle and all the other things is not for me worth it. I'll still be, and I'm intense enough of a fan that I don't know that I need to be amongst a bunch of other fans to feel like I'm completely freaked out and invested, and my whole life depends on the next pitch. Do you have predictions?
I don't, but I do want to ask you a question. Because I know you live and die with your players.
Mhm.
What is I have trouble making sense of I'm nervous for Joe Musgrove right now,
Right,
and it doesn't count
right for
for my
us.
team, but I'm
Right,
still like, come on, Joe, come
right,
on. Oh, that pitch, that was definitely a strike, you know what I mean? And
totally.
I've had that all weekend. Like whenever my guys are playing, I'm
Right.
nervous. I'm like, why are you nervous? It's over.
Yeah, I
Is it
would
just
say
muscle memory?
I think it's part of it is muscle memory. I think that especially not the guys who I'm not keeping,
Right.
but my keepers. Yeah, I think I'm so connected to them and their performance. Like I'm hoping for no injury. I'm still like really wishing for them to succeed. Yeah, I think that's for me. It's completely the same way. I still like kind of habitually watch the Guardians play because I had Quan and Jimenez, and they were such a big part of my team. And I still want to watch Jimenez, and I still want to. I think some of the players, not Jimenez necessarily, but some of the ones that are on the bubble in terms of keeping.
Mhm.
I'm watching them and I'm trying to figure out as much as I can about whether those are players that I want to have on my roster next year or not. Um, and then of course the Mariners, yeah, I think that there's no I'm of course rooting for every one of them, but every time Julio comes up, I still have that feeling that he's gonna hit a home run. And part of it is just because I've been trained to think that way because of the regular season.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's completely natural. And I if you're on my team, you're on my team. And I want to see you succeed. It's funny though.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Predictions. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be the Guardians and the Stros, unfortunately, and then yeah, I think it's going to be Dodgers and Braves.
And
I
then
don't know who wins tonight. I think if it's tight, I can see New York winning in a blowout, but I think if it's a tight game, I think I favor the Padres. Um, but yeah, it's so close. I really hope the Mariners beat the Astros. Who's going to be their game one starter? Do you think
Gilbert.
Gilbert?
It's
Okay,
Gilbert
Gilbert
because
for
Gilbert one, Castillo two,
okay,
and I don't think that they've named game three yet, but it wouldn't surprise anybody if it's Kirby.
okay. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
my I'm guilty of kind of forgetting about Gilbert. That was my when I saw Kirby come in last night. I was like, well, who's gonna pitch game one if
right.
they advance? But
Game
that seems like you have to win.
well, game three is on Saturday. So wait, yeah, it goes Tuesday. I think it goes Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And so they can afford to so they would go Gilbert Tuesday, Castillo Thursday, Kirby or Ray Saturday, and then Sunday would be what 5 days rest after pitching Tuesday. So Gilbert would go game four probably. But
There's
yeah,
no way they can get Castillo twice.
I think that I think the Mariners match up well with Houston though. You just have to have find some offense. The problem is that we don't score a lot of runs against them.
That's my worry. Is not the I know the Mariners can pitch with him 100%. This is my yeah, it's my worry of the depth of the Astros pitching and can the Mariners score enough,
Right.
get enough timely hits.
My hope honestly is I think superstars rise to the occasion in the playoffs. And I think the Mariners' chance is if Julio gets hot, I think that the Mariners can win that way. But to count on Crawford and some of the other players to perform even at the level that normal expectation, I don't know if you can do that because pitching is so strong in playoffs.
Hmm.
The other guy who I think is a little bit of an X factor is Haniger. I think Haniger could carry the Mariners for a while if he got hot, but we'll see. Houston's tough, tough squad. Um, I actually am going to pick the Mariners. I think that they have more on the line than the Astros do. The Astros have been here before, and sometimes that experience is really valuable. But I also think that for the Mariners, there's a little bit of team of destiny right now,
Yeah, for sure.
and I'm going to continue to pick them until they lose. Obviously,
Go
I
for
do
I
agree
do
with
it.
you. I think that the Guardians are the favorite in the other series for me. I don't trust Cole. I don't trust. I certainly don't trust Severino's health. Right, like not that he's going to get hurt, but I don't know if that's who you want to be your game three starter. And then Cortez, I like a lot, but I think Cortez may struggle against a lineup who's um, as disciplined as the Guardians lineup is. Not that they're disciplined, but they definitely are not a strikeout team, like you said. Um, they also have momentum. So for me, it would be Mariners Guardians. I don't really know what to pick from there, but I think that would be a lot of fun. Uh, in the Braves Philly series, I'd have to see who the Phillies are going to be able to start because it gets pretty dicey when you get past um, the first two starters. Whereas the Braves, Strider's healthy, they can roll Freed, Morton, Strider out there to begin with. So I'd probably pick the Braves there, and then you can't really pick against the Dodgers. Um, I think the Mets have a much better chance against the Dodgers
Mm.
because they have three disciplined pitchers who throw strikes. And I think Musgrove would have some success against the Dodgers or has, but Snell, the Dodgers will have Snell out of the game within 3 2/3 innings, right? They would. They just take pitch after pitch and have 6 walks, probably like 2 hits, 6 walks, 3 runs, 5 Ks, and he's gone after 3 2/3 innings, and then they're into the bullpen. So, depending on when Snell pitches, I think San Diego could use up a ton of their bullpen against the Dodgers early on in the series, and then just be kind of done from there. So, for me, it's Dodgers, Braves, Mariners, and Guardians. Mariners Guardians would be like just the dream matchup.
Oh,
So much
absolutely.
fun.
I think I sent you that message when they played in
Oh,
September. It was a great series, like every game. And I told her, I was like, man, I would take this in October 10 times over. They were just those games were just so compelling.
yep,
It'd be so watchable. Like having to watch the Astros is just like gritting your teeth. And that
right.
would be
Well,
so much fun.
I think the strategic portion of the Mariners Guardians would be really interesting, right? Because you got,
Yeah.
teams that play baseball. Like, you know what I mean. Listeners may not know what I mean when I say that, but you got teams that aren't going to launch a bajillion home runs. The Mariners might hit a bunch of home runs, but it's not because they're built to do that as much as it is that they just happen to. And then just a ton of bullpen, like dominant bullpens, dominant starting pitching. Yeah, that would be a series for the ages, I think. And I think it'd be a battle. I think it would go 6 or 7 games. Um, Anything else with playoff baseball? I have the Padres Mets game on right now. Did you cut Chris Bassett? Is that what I saw?
I did.
Why'd you cut him so soon? Or well, why did
Uh,
you cut him?
I was simply trying to maximize innings and I was trying to win. Is really what it came down to. After he had his last start, I had to cut someone to bring someone off the minors. I was trying
Mhm,
to win holds and just trying to get both Cody Morris in the lineup as well. So
mhm.
basically, on the good day, there were days where I had 9 relievers going. I was just trying to maximize bullpen opportunities, get every strikeout I could,
Got it.
because my opponent had really maxed out volume and strikeouts, and so while his strikeout per inning was average, the volume was I was trying to keep up.
Right,
So it wasn't a cut that I would have made if I had not been in the position I was in. I was simply trying to win, to do everything I could to win.
right.
And he
So
was not someone I was likely going to keep. And I, could have tried to trade him for sure. But I didn't know how much he would demand either. So it was a tough decision, but I was just trying to win.
got it. Yeah, I was surprised to see you cut him just because, obviously you gave up Bueller. You got a better pick back, but you gave up Bueller to get him. And um, Chris Bassett's good. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but that's what you got to do. You want to try to go and win the whole thing, right? Is you got to make some tough
Yeah.
decisions there.
Yeah. I didn't feel like a 30, as much as I like him a lot. He's a free agent. I didn't feel like a 34-year-old free agent. Not knowing where he's going to be next year, probably not going to be kept was worth, again, potentially trying to go after a category that might be the difference. So being a higher seed, all I had to do was tie. So every category was critical, and I was competing in almost every category up until the last day, with the exception
Right,
of steals and errors.
right. Let's see. Any other playoff talk or playoff thoughts for you? You got a World Series winner prediction?
Let's do another episode when we have another round.
All right, that sounds good. Um, Open forum. You have a question?
Yeah, my open forum is I know it's been a while since we recorded, but if you've thought about like do you have any goals for this venture, this podcast for its second iteration? Have you had time to
Uh,
think about that if you
it's
haven't in
gonna
your
sound
mind?
silly, but I think getting or obvious, but getting the podcast in the hands of people who can help us create a greater viewership. So, and then maybe increase the production quality a little bit. Those would be the two things that come to mind. I think from a content standpoint, I'm really proud of what we do. It's entertaining. If I was a baseball fan, it would be entertaining and kind of fun to just have on at home and listen to. Uh, and I think we've proven based on our finishes in our home league and TGFBI that we've got some things to say. And so the next step again is exposure for me. Uh, Content wise, I think we're still feeling out what works and what doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
but just talking baseball is fun, and it's as much about, for me at least, it's as much about me enjoying it as it is, and you enjoying it as it is the listener enjoying. And I think if we're having fun with it and appreciating the conversation, the listeners will too. How about you?
Yeah, I would the second point has been on my mind of I think you and I both do quite a bit of research and um have data that we speak to, and I think from an audio video quality and also maybe an opportunity to, put something up on the screen that's referring to what we're talking about.
Sure,
That shows some of that data to help people follow along.
sure.
Because again, I think the quality of the information is really, really good.
Hmm.
And the thought behind it and the way it's delivered is really, really good. So yeah, just upping that is something that's been on my mind, in a way that's financially viable for sure.
Right.
Because there's a lot of options out there, but it's, you have to pay for them. So that's been on my mind. I think for me, it's yeah, I'm just grateful for the partnership most of all this first year and just making it all the way through. I
Right.
know we took a little bit of a mental break the last 3 weeks to kind of wrap up the season because we were both dealing with the ups and downs of the playoff element. But
Yep.
by and large, just keeping it going
Yep.
through my stupid third shift schedule and through uh, pre-draft season and during rankings to the end season grind. I'm just really just proud that we made up, not made it, but we went all the way through. We stay committed to it, and I'm really proud of the quality of it. I want to continue to elevate it.
Awesome. I love it. Uh, my question for you is, what's your first off-season project and have you started it yet?
My first off-season project has been following the AFL really closely.
Uh-huh.
Um, I've been doing daily just reviews of the prior day, making notes of players I want to dig deeper on. And then I'm going to be investing in some type of paid service to look at those players to more closely, just to try to take my scouting on the pre MLB players to try to elevate that. So I've always been interested in the AFL for sure, but I'm just following it much more closely with a lot more intentionality than I have in the past.
That's awesome. Uh, so I've been reading about an hour a day, just trying to soak in the last bit of the warm sunshine here in Walla Walla. Before work, I've been reading about an hour a day, a book called Scout's Honor by Bill Shanks. And so he wrote about, I think it like I said earlier, I think it was in '04, '05. Um, he he did a daily program for the Braves organization on TV about the Braves basically, and you got to know the organization and the history, and it's a very it's about the Atlanta Braves and about their scouting philosophies, and but it's just so interesting to learn about how different I think the process was even 15, 20 years ago as it is now. Um, it feels almost like it's 35, 40 years ago in the way that he's talking. Um, and there's a lot of, I forget about the vitriol that a lot of folks had towards sabermetrics at that time.
Mm,
Um, but that said, I always think that there's something to be learned from anything, whether you agree with that perspective or not. And so it's been really quite enlightening for me to read that book, um, and just a lot of fun. I did finish the Dodgers book as well, and that was kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So part of my off season is to just read and learn as much as I can. Uh, I've also started so I'm going to do Excel spreadsheets with all of the stats that I have at my disposal for each position. And so I'm on catcher right now, and I've got, what is it? I think I've got 70 or so catchers in the database. Um, yeah, it looks like about maybe 75. Uh, and so all the normal counting stats, and then the stats that we talk about, um, swing percent, O swing, O contact, Z swing, Z contact, swinging strike, CSW, batted ball statistics, and then one thing I'm doing new this year is triple slash and whiff rate against individual pitches for each player. So I'm just working on catcher right now, and then I'm going to try to translate this into a sortable um, database on SQL eventually. But the day after the regular season, I started digging in. I was like Christmas for me to know that these stats were complete, and
So
super
how are
excited.
you importing each individual data point? Are you downloading it from a source? Or are you keying it in or
I'm keying it in.
okay?
So I'm basically creating a custom sheet on Fangraphs that gives me the information that I need in order, and then inputting it into Excel, and then using Savant to fill in a couple of the stats that I needed. But there's something about the manual input that actually is really therapeutic for me.
Okay.
So I enjoy it, but I'm already frustrated that um, I can't sort it in the way that I can with SQL. And so I'm excited to get it into the computer form. It is going to take me a couple of months, I think, to get all of these stats down, but it's also a way for me to learn. It's like in a history class, right? In college, where you're always told, like, read it, write it, type it, print it out, then try to memorize it. And those different forms of uh, created memorization by doing it
Sure.
in the different
Hmm.
ways. And so for me, it's
Yeah.
kind of the same thing with being able to enter it and then also look at it in different forms. But yeah, super fun. Just kind of what I do in my downtime just to relax a little bit. Do we want to open some cards? Do you have some cards?
I do.
Awesome. Why don't you go first?
Let me turn off my
Your player.
blurring. Bases loaded for the Padres, by the way.
I see that.
Austin Nola up to bat.
Yep.
One, two, one.
0-1 count.
Oh, yeah, I'm showing 0-2. But
You're a little ahead then.
all right, so I have just a few cards left of this Donruss 2022 set. It's
Uh-huh.
been so handsome. So Nate Lowe
Uh-huh.
used to be Nathaniel, or is he Nathaniel now? I can't remember
Nathaniel
which.
now, used to be Nate.
Nathaniel now.
Hmm.
Your guy.
Yeah, man. I hope he I hope he's back to being the Acuna we know next year. He was so hurt this year.
His little brother's making some noise in the AFL.
I saw that. Luis Angel.
Jackson Kowar.
He made some changes too this year. They're finally starting to kind of help out their young pitchers in that organization a little bit.
And then we got a local guy here for me, a Pirate. Oh, 2 RBI single. Henry Davis.
Nice. That's
He's
awesome.
I've been reading about a catcher named Indy Perez, also in
Yeah,
the Pirate system. There's
yeah.
some debate about whether Davis or Perez are actually the better prospect, which is kind
Is
of
it Andy
interesting.
Rodriguez?
Oh, yes, probably my
Yeah,
fault. Yeah.
yeah.
I
He's a
know his
good.
first name's Indy,
Yeah,
but
he's a good prospect.
ENDY.
Yep.
I was looking at prospects on Fangraphs with like 70 bat control, and he was on that list. I was like, oh, and then he's doing well in the fall league. So
Yeah.
that's what I have today.
Let me. Okay. Again, thank you, Chico, for sending us the cards. I've got a pack of 93 Bowman. These are 29 years old. How crazy is that? Probably 30 because they usually come out the year, if they call them 93, they usually would come out in 92.
Hmm.
Insane, though. All right. There's a player that I don't remember. Daryl Henderson. I do not remember him. Interesting. 53rd round pick. That's wild. Left-handed pitcher. Remember getting these? The old checklist?
Yes.
Murphy.
Aaron Small, pitcher. Blue Jays. Julio Bruno, pitcher Padres. Man, I don't know a lot of these guys.
And deep
Oh,
cuts.
this one, Reggie Sanders. I remember he charged, I don't know what inning it was, but it was late in the game, and Pedro had a perfect game and hit Reggie Sanders. And Reggie Sanders charged Pedro Martinez. And I remember thinking to myself, man, he's not trying to hit you. He has a perfecto right now. But funny. Greg McMichael, very deceptive right-handed reliever. Just threw lots and lots and lots of sliders and changeups. Rob Dibble.
Oh man.
Remember him? Nasty boys. Chad Curtis, right-handed fourth outfielder, center fielder. Dan Fry. I do not remember him, but player of the year in the Appalachian League.
Put it up. I can't see it. There you go. Huh.
One of my favorite players growing up, Kevin Mitchell.
I forgot. I didn't know he was with the Reds.
Yeah. He was all over the place towards the end. But man,
Okay.
he was so good with the Giants. Brian Coling, who I don't know. Darren Fletcher, who I do remember. Middle infielder, left-handed. Rick Gorecki, pitcher, Dodgers. And ex-Mariner Paul Sorrento. And that's my Bowman pack. Anything else?
That's it.
Just going to watch some playoff baseball and reconvene next week.
Great to catch up with you. Enjoy this game tonight.
Likewise, brother. Likewise. Miss you.
All right. Peace out.
All right.